ring if you're ready to care. Oh, let's talk power, let's talk speed. Hosted by the one and only We Too Deep. Turn it up loud, feel the power in your seat. This is Slapping Me, yes, Slapping Me.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Slapping Me community show. It is Fan Question Friday. We have a bunch of questions today to go down. So we're not going to take too long on the intro. We're just going to jump right on in. I've grouped the questions as they were asked throughout, since the last Fan Question Friday. I put them in the notes as they come in. So these first few are from B-Master. And then I got Wavy D's questions. Then we're going to end with Kara's questions. So we'll start here at the top. He says, something to think about. Why is it that Kendal Grey got such a big push, but Kali Armstrong did not? And B-Master, I have a question. I want to answer your question with the question. And I mean this legitimately. I'm not trying to diminish whatever your viewpoint is or your opinion on something. I want to know necessarily what push Kendal got that Kali didn't get. Kali was the first ever Evolve champion. I will say Kendal was on NXT before Evolve in a more jobber-esque role. But genuinely, they both really came up through Evolve. And I will say this. There has to be something to be said about fan interaction. The fans, I think, bought into Kendal Grey more than they bought into Kali Armstrong. I like both of them. I think both could be very useful in NXT. Here's the thing I think also that plays into it. I don't know how much WWE feels they can get out of Kali Armstrong. Let me explain to you what I mean. I just had to look this up. What I was trying to look up was when did they debut in the Performance Center? Like, when did they sign? And Kendal Grey's been with the company since late 2023, early 2024. And Kali Armstrong around the same time. But here's the major difference that I found in looking for these wrestlers. Both of them, oddly enough, have birthdays in June. So right? Kendal Grey is turning 25 this year, which is absolutely insane. Like, when I pulled up her Wikipedia and it said she was born in 2001, absolutely insane. My point with being that is, so Kendal Grey's turning 25 this year. Kali Armstrong was born in 1994. She's turning 32 this year. There's a certain limit you can get out of Kali Armstrong, right? Just because of her age, she probably has at most 7-ish good years left in her, whereas Kendal Grey has 10 to 15. And I think if you're making a business decision at the developmental level, so understand that before they, NXT, this is why I think, I conceded a few weeks ago that NXT is developmental. At least in the way that it's building the next generation of main event stars. Whether or not you agree that it's developmental, I'm sort of in the middle. I'll concede with the argument to where I no longer argue that it's no longer developmental. I think we have to at least agree it's there to develop characters or something for the main roster, right? So if you're making a business decision on who's going to be your main star that you put all your money on, because in Evolve, Kendal and Kali were sort of the breakout stars of the first few episodes overall on the women's side. And so first off, fan interaction, I just don't necessarily think as a whole the fan base can get behind Kali Armstrong. It's really hard to get that big push as a heel in a heel-dominated NXT women's locker room. Like, think of all the heels at the time Kali was coming into Evolve. You think of all the heels that were JC, Fatal Influence. Now all of them is gone, and now there's that opportunity to get. But even still, you got Jada Parker, who's kind of that heel character. Kalani is a heel. I think Nikita's a heel. I don't know, but right. Kali's gonna have a harder time getting over because she doesn't have that fan interaction. As with Kendal came in and immediately drew fan interaction. And right, so if you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at Kendal's by far better in the ring. She's definitely taken to the in-ring stuff better. I think she's very good at promos, whereas Kali, I don't think is better than her at promos. And you're having to make a decision. Who are we going to put in a position to become a superstar? And you look at everything I just said, where Kendal Grey, about to turn 25, better in the ring, better on the mic, better fan reaction. Or you have Kali Armstrong, who's good. She has a great look. Not so good on the not that she's bad, but not better than Kendal on the mic. Not that she's bad, but not better than Kendal in the ring. Not that she doesn't have fans, but she doesn't have the fan reaction Kendal has. So then you look at everything, and I think it's the obvious choice. Kendal Grey is the future of the NXT division. As we stand, right? You could build Kendal Grey for longer. It's more beneficial to build. Like it'd be one of these things where, like, okay, if I'm a football team, it's one of the things that happen every year in like the NBA draft, where you get to like the late first round, second round, and most of the big names that are going to play their rookie year have been taken by this point, right? And so you're getting to the place, let's say like the Boston Celtics, where they typically pick around 25 to 30 every single year, and they have a strong roster, right? If they're drafting, it's more so for like a depth role to build into the potential of taking over a position at some point down the line. And so they're not looking for a superstar, and all the superstars are already gone by their pick, typically. And so they have a question. Do I draft the 18-year-old out of 1 year in college, or do I draft the 25-year-old who played, 4 full seasons, had a COVID year, and had a redshirt year? Spent 6 years in college. He's 25, and he wasn't the best player in his draft class. Do I get the potential and put something that I can draft someone that I can get money out of to build to be a potential superstar, or do I draft the guy that maybe has better completed development at 25? He could play day one, but he's never going to really become that next level superstar. He's always going to be, 7th or 8th on the chart, on the depth chart, right? or they don't call it depth chart in the lineup. He's going to be like the 7th man, right? And so I think from a business perspective, WWE is looking at age, how good she is, fan reaction, the ability to play both heel and face. And Kendal Grey is that, right? She's the next thing. So why did she get a bigger push? Because of all of I just said. She's just better than Kali Armstrong. And as a Kali Armstrong fan, I don't necessarily think Kali Armstrong is necessarily bad. I just don't think she had the impact on her debut to the NXT roster that WWE feels confident putting everything behind her. I think she's going to be in that Jada Parker role where she's sort of... But that's also like the problem as well with her is, can I just be honest? She's not unique. Kali Armstrong and Jada Parker essentially play the same character, just like to me, I got the same character from them, right? It's the girl that someone says an insult and she snaps off, right? There's nothing there to necessarily differentiate the two. Now, if I had to pick, I would pick Kali Armstrong over Jada Parker. I'm just going to be honest with you. But I think a combination of she's 32 this year, she's not as good as Kendal on either aspect of the business, and if I'm trying to look for developmental, who am I going to put my money into? I'd rather take a few more years because imagine this. Imagine it takes 2 more years before either of these two get to the main roster. Because you look at the main roster, they just sent an influx of talent, and they got to let that breathe. So you're not going to get another large influx of women's talent for another 2 or 3 years. So by that point, Kendal Grey's 28, and Kali Armstrong's like 35. So if you send Kali Armstrong up at 35, and she gets 2-3 years at most of peak performance at the main roster, whereas Kendal Grey could give you 7. You see what I'm saying? So I think they're looking long term. We have to build Kendal because she's the one that can be here longer. She's the one that is already better, and if we just give her that push, right? Now I think Kendal Grey is going up to the main roster pretty soon. I really do. I think she's better than a lot of the women there, and I think after next year's Mania, when they start doing cuts, I think she's going to be one of the ones that get injected into the main roster. That's just me. But we'll move on to the next question. Now he sent a picture of some guy named Chud. We'll talk about that in a minute. And essentially he was arrested, put on bail for a certain amount of money. That's not important, but because what's important is the question that he asks, right? And he says, I just don't know, or I just have to know, how does this type of stuff happen and people get away? And people like him get away with it. It just baffles me that people say that racism is dead, yet you have people willing to defend him. So I think what I'm asking is, will there ever be a time when racism isn't a thing? And again, it's about this Chud guy. So first off, I've never seen a video from this Chud guy. I have no idea who this is. I haven't even cared enough to look him up. I'll say this. The reason people like him continue to do stupid things is because people watch. Right? So, this question, though, is tricky. Because how you answer it, I think, you can answer it in several different ways. And I think it really just depends on your worldview on how you see things. So for me, my worldview is this. Race does not exist. So I don't think in categories of race. Because it doesn't exist. outside of our Darwinistic evolutionary thinking, right? For example, like everyone knows this, a lot of my thinking comes from my worldview, which comes from, my religion, my faith, right? And so if you were to open a Bible, right, and you were to flip through any of the pages, you would never see the concept nor the word of race ever mentioned in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. There's just no usage of that category thinking. Race is not a category that the Bible allows to be discussed. And so I don't think in those categories because they're actually false categories. Race actually didn't really become a thing we thought about until Charles Darwin wrote Origin of the Species, which was, and I will agree, a racist book, right? Evolutionary thought is racist in concept, right? Because Darwin essentially asserted, in Darwin's theories, Hitler used them, Marx used them, and a lot of the socialist leaders were racist as all get out, right? But the idea behind it is, well, that as we evolved, that white people evolved better. That's what Hitler said. That's what Darwin said. So I will agree that racism does exist in people who think in those categories. But it's not a category that exists in reality. What we need to understand is, I'm as white European as can be. You pull up my 23andMe, and I'm literally 99.7% European. And then I have like 0.3% trace African descent. I live in the southeast. More than likely, my ancestors came from that small ancestry trait. Part of it's Nigerian, part of it's West African. So I have East African and West African in me. Here's the concept. We all have a little bit of African in us because it is believed that our common ancestor, the first ancestor we all share with, what Christians would call Adam and Eve, well, they came from the area known as the Levant, which is Africa in that area, right? Strange concept. This would have been a time before the tectonic plates were separated, like Adam and Eve. So all the plates were together, what we would call Pangea. So it literally would have made sense they could have lived in Africa, and what we now know as Africa, before the plates shifted. And that's a strange concept we could talk about later, right? I do believe Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden and all of that was centered in Africa. I do believe that. Or what we would call as Mesopotamia. But again, it's all connected. Before the flood, before the plates separated. Again, we're not going to go really into that question. This question is difficult because it assumes that race is a thing. So I'll say this. The longer we continue to think about race as an actual legitimate concept, then racism will continue. Right? Because if everyone's trained to think of things in terms of race, then of course racism's going to exist. Right? It's the same thing with like, I think it was Morgan Freeman who basically was asked, how do we stop racism? And he said, stop talking about it. And so do I think Chud is a racist? Again, I've never seen any of his videos. I don't know any of his content. From what I've read about him just briefly on the internet, I think he was just doing things that he knew would get him clicks. It's part of the stupid generation we live in now. I don't know him personally. I don't even know what he's being arrested for, so I don't have a comment on the picture that you sent. That's why I'm not really talking about it. I want to talk about your question. Will we live in a world where racism doesn't exist? As long as we continue to think through the false categories of race, then racism's not going anywhere. Right? Which is why when I say I don't see race, it's not because I don't understand that there are differences in skin tone. Of course, absolutely. And that also doesn't mean that I don't recognize that those differences in skin tone, depending on who you're talking to or where you're at, can lead to different results. Completely, like, understand that we do have a system of people and a system and a that do and have been trained to think in divisive terminologies like race. That is the system default in our culture. And because of that, I understand that there are differences in how people are treated based on something that they have zero control over. But that doesn't just go for, well, black people are treated differently. 100% they are. And in certain cases, 100%. Will not disagree. I think it would be ignorant to disagree that in certain cases, in certain places, black people are treated differently. But I also think it would be ignorant to say the opposite doesn't exist. That in certain circumstances, because I would ask this question: would affirmative action not be considered reverse racism? And let me explain that question. If the point of, doing your best in high school was so that you can get into college, and you have someone like I'm just going to use me as an example. You have someone like me. I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA. Now, my mistake was I didn't do any extracurriculars. I went to school. I didn't like going to school. A lot of people assume that I'm smart. A 3.95 GPA, that was what I graduated with. I was completely surprised on the day of graduation. We had to get there early, get everyone set up, right? And I apparently graduated cum laude or whatever the hell that is. I had a cord sitting on my chair, and I went to the person in control of all of that. I'm like, bro, what is this? They're like, what was your GPA? I said 3.95. They're like, yeah, that's yours. Completely surprised me. Didn't even know this was was gonna happen. Right? I wasn't smart. I didn't apply myself any harder than most other people did in high school, right? Now, there were a lot of people in my class, in my graduating class, that had 4.5s because they took all the AP. I didn't take hard classes. I just wanted to get through school, right? It wasn't I had a 3.95 because over half of my classes were either taught by coaches who just wanted to coach, and so everyone got 100, or were history classes and I love history, and so I was willing to participate in those. But I didn't take extra English classes because I hated English, and part of the reason it wasn't a 4.0 because English. But right, I just wanted to get through the day. I really didn't. I don't consider myself to be a scholastic scholar, right? I had a 3.95 because I took easy classes. And the one time I tried to attempt to be smart and took honors chemistry, and I got a D because I'm not smart, bro. I just appear smart because some of the classes that I took were super, in certain subjects. They would always put me in the math class where I was the smartest one in the class, and it was a lot of the troubled kids who really didn't do well in school. And I would just be there and be like, bro, let me just do your work. Let's just get this done with. Right? Or they would always come to me and bro, how do you understand this? And then I would break it down. Because what I realized was a lot of these kids didn't struggle because they were stupid. A lot of them struggled because teachers don't know how to teach to, I'll be honest, the inner city. A lot of the kids in my math class were inner city troubled. I'm not going to say this negative. It's not a negative thing. They were troubled inner city black kids. And there's a certain way you have to teach these people. You can't teach to it's a thing, like, even when I worked for, like, Zaxby's or restaurant, like, in restaurants, and I was managing and I had to train new hires. You can't train a new hire the same way you train every single, like, you can't do it the same. You have to learn how they learn. And so I was like, bro, do you understand this? Like, and I was able to communicate, like, because they wouldn't understand because the teacher wouldn't teach to them. They would teach to someone like me who had a higher understanding of the concept, right? But if, like, for example, like algebra 2, well, if these guys struggle with algebra 1 and they don't care about algebra, they're never going to use this stuff. And then they get to algebra 2 and they haven't mastered algebra 1 yet. So why are you teaching them this higher level stuff? You got to make sure, but then you're teaching it in a way as well. Like, there would even be some times, I had a teacher once who just, like, talked way above everyone's head. And I eventually raised my hand and was like, bro, none of us understand what you're saying. Like, if I said, I looked at everyone, I said, I don't mean this disrespectfully. If I don't understand what you're saying, teach, none of these people understand it. We got to find a way to communicate to where at least I can. If you can communicate with me, I can communicate with them when they come and ask me for help, right? But you got to at least be able to communicate. Like, that's part of being a teacher, learning how people learn. And so I think it would be ignorant to assume. Let's not go down that rabbit trail again. Let's finish this current rabbit trail. My point is I had a 3.95. I did relatively well on entrance exams for college. Now, in-state schools typically take you if you apply because they want to keep their people in state. And I knew I had zero interest of going to Duke because it's a private school and it costs like $90,000 a year. Had zero interest in that. They want to go to Chapel Hill. I didn't want to stay in state. I'm going to be honest with you. And at the time, I was looking at, like, Christian schools to go to because that was the path I thought I was supposed to be on, was, like, studying that. But just for a joke. So, like, I had been accepted by a school in Tennessee, a Christian school in Tennessee, and I'd been accepted to Dallas Baptist, and, of course, Dallas, Texas. And I ended up going to neither. I ended up going to community college. If we ever look back at, like, is there something I would change, I probably would have gone to this 4-year. But I also don't think that way because I am of the belief system that everything that happens was supposed to happen. And happened for a purpose, right? Like, nothing happens that God didn't ordain or allow to happen, right? But just for the fun of it, I applied to Baylor University. Technically a Christian school, but not really. Like, I wanted to see if I could get into one of these bigger schools. Because if Baylor would have accepted me, I probably would have gone to Baylor. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I would have been a Bears fan for 4 years. That would have been cool, right? And looking back at it, I don't understand why. I don't know why I didn't apply to Clemson. I probably would have gotten in. But anyway, so I applied to Baylor, did not get into Baylor. Now, what I do know is there are certain people who, I don't know for a fact the percentage of people or the individuals, but what I do know is that Baylor does and still, like, at the time they did affirmative action. Everyone does. And basically what affirmative action says is we have to take certain people of certain races or gender ideologies, identities, to appear equal. And so what that means is the white kid with the 3.95 doesn't get into Baylor, but the black kid with the 2.2 who doesn't understand a lot of the material they learned in high school, they get in, and that's problematic for two reasons. First, I would declare that that's racist. If the idea of doing the best in high school to be prepared to get into college, and college is to prepare you for the workforce, if that's the idea, which is what they sold us, wouldn't you want the most qualified people in your colleges? Not saying I dropped out of college because I didn't, it was, I wouldn't say too hard, I just wasn't interested in it. And so I would say that I'm an anomaly in that my 3.95 doesn't really show how ready I was for higher education, right? But my point is there are people out there who have high GPAs, who are intellectually smart, who get passed over at certain colleges because they can't take them, the white kid with the 3.95, because they have to let the black kid with the 2.2 in to meet certain quotas. And then here's where it's problematic on the second front. That black kid, inner city kid, who struggled with high school comes to college and it's much harder than high school. And he gets put on academic probation because he was put in a position where he would fail when it would have been better for him to go to Howard or a smaller community college or a school that met him at his level. Because if you go to a big school, there are people who get into Harvard who are not ready for Harvard because of affirmative action, and then they get into these Harvard level classes, and the teachers, they're not going to dumb their stuff down because most of the kids in their classes are academically excelling. And so you get 2 or 3 students who are in because of affirmative action, and they struggle, and it's not a good experience. And they either quit or they get academically suspended, and then it's good for nobody. And so in the same way, I understand this idea of if this was a black person, they wouldn't have been given bail or whatever, right? Or again, I don't know what Chud was even arrested for. So I'm not trying to talk about him in particular. I'm just saying this question of asking, is racism ever going to go away? Well, I would say yes. Ultimately, in everything we're looking for, all the hatred and wrong, here's what I like to tell people, right? The human condition is to do evil. And until that evil is removed, and it's going to be removed one day, right? Now, it's going to be removed. But here's the problem. We all look at everyone else and say, well, at least I'm not that. We're just as evil as everyone else in our natural nature, right? And so I think it would be ignorant to say that people aren't treated differently, but black people aren't the only ones being treated differently. If you go to, maybe in America they are, but if you go to certain parts of America, the dynamic's different. There are certain areas that I've been told as a white person, you don't want to be there after dark. It's not going to end well for you. Just as I'm sure there are places where black kids are told, hey, there are certain places you don't want to be after dark. We all have the same experience. And it's because we think in false categories. We think in false. Race doesn't exist. It just doesn't. We're all human. There's one race. It's the human race. Right? The Bible, my worldview, only thinks of things in terms of ethnos or ethnicity. So I understand there's a difference in, well, I'm American, well, I'm German, I'm African, I'm Australian. There's a difference in ethnicity, but a race in and of itself doesn't exist. It's a false category. It doesn't actually exist because God didn't create it that way. He didn't say, well, there's white and there's black and there's Hispanic. No. We're all human. We're all of the same human race. I've said this before on this show. I'll say it now again. there's only a 0.02% difference between any single human being ever in existence. 0.02% DNA difference between any human being. And a lot of that has to just do with how much melanin your body produces. Like, there's only one color. There is no white. White doesn't exist, right? I'm not actually white. I'm just a very, very light shade of brown. I'm like a peach color, right? Like, if you were to take the spectrum of brown from dark brown all the way down to, like, skin tone like peach, right? It's all brown because we were made from dirt, right? It's all brown. Everyone's brown. It just depends on how much melanin your body produces. But no one's born white. Like, have you seen the color white? Like, actual white. No one's that color. It just doesn't exist. Now, there are some people who have a hyper melanated existence, and they are, like, almost the color black. But realistically, in the normalcy, black doesn't even exist. We're brown, right? The natural skin tone is brown, and it just depends on what level of the spectrum of melanin do you have. But we're all brown. We all come from the same color, right? And when I say this, it sounds weird, it sounds crazy, because we've been taught to think in these socialistic, Darwinistic, Marxist categories that were simply created to divide us. Race doesn't exist. And that's where I will end that question. He then sends a picture, says, which WWE contract are you signing? You get the Raw contract, 3-year deal, $650K a year. Your role, you're a top superstar mentored by Seth Rollins, with your bonus being a main event, that you get to main event Raw multiple times per year. You then get your NXT contract, where you're the NXT champion, 2 years, $250K. Your mentor is HBK. Your big bonus is the big title defenses, and, you know, you're the top star in NXT. And then you have the SmackDown contract, 3 years, $750 a year. You're the face of SmackDown, mentored by Paul Heyman, and your contract bonus is essentially you get to main event WrestleMania. I could see either three of these being somewhat tempting, just depending on what your goal is. If it was me, what contract am I signing? I'd probably sign the SmackDown deal. One, Paul Heyman has a lot of pull. I'm going to be on TV, and I'm going to be highly pushed. I'm going to make the most money, and I get the main event WrestleMania. I think if I was in the business, that would be the easiest contract for me to sign, if I'm being completely honest. I'll be honest, though, after that, like, if you remove the SmackDown one, and that's just because I get the main event WrestleMania, I'd probably go with the NXT one next, just because I'm a guaranteed champion. Whereas, if you take the Raw contract, sure, I'm main eventing, but you know how many people have main evented Raws that aren't, you know, like, and Seth Rollins isn't really in storylines that right now, or if he's my mentor, I'm assuming I'm part of a group he's creating. Which, by the way, I gotta pause for a second before we move to DJ. All right, we'll move to B Master's last question. I gotta pause while I'm on this thought. I saw the news report coming out of the dirt sheets, and it could be false. I don't know. I just read it. There's rumors that Seth Rollins at Italy is trying to create a group that's sort of Shield-like to attack the Vision. And so then I sat here and thought, well, how many people are in the Vision? We have Logan Paul, Braun Breaker, Theory, So, and then Bronson Reed, assumably, when he returns. Well, if we're creating a Shield-like group, assuming Seth is part of it, you need 2 people. But I was also thinking, if you looked at what happened at NXT, and I've also seen rumors that more NXT people may be coming up. And you looked at what happened on NXT on Tuesday, with Dark State essentially kicking out Saquon, which I think is perfect. Saquon Sugars is funny by himself. I think he needed to be by himself. He'll be fine. But part of me wondered, what if Dark State is the Shield-like group that Seth Rollins brings up to the main roster? And then you can have Seth and Dark State versus the Vision. And we thought the build for it would have been Seth, the Prophets, and like a Joe Hendry or an LA Knight for War Games. But it's really this new group Seth Rollins is. Again, could be wrong. But that thought popped in my head when I was watching NXT earlier this week. Let's move on to B-Master's last question. If you were rich and money was not an issue for you, one could wish, would you go out to eat every day, or would you cook at home? This is an interesting, fascinating question. And the answer for that, it depends on what level of rich are we talking about. Like, is this never have to work again rich? Like, I struck $1 billion and I could just live off of that $1 billion for the rest of my life? Or is this like, hey, you could survive, but like you got to work still, right? Because I would technically consider someone who makes like $200K a year rich, right? I'd consider that rich, but they'd still need to work like every year to maintain that lifestyle. I'm assuming the issue is like money's not a thing. You're rich, you're balling, you don't have to make money. And if that's the case, more than likely, I think it would just be a 50-50 split. I'm going to be honest with you. But I'm also the person, like, if I struck $1 billion, I don't think I'd show it. Like, I'm the type of person, like, if I became rich, like a super billionaire, like, I'm not going out to these fancy steakhouses. I'm going to go to McDonald's because that's what I grew up on. I like McDonald's. But I also wouldn't dress around. Like, a lot of people have this visualization of like these super rich people who just go out to all these fancy restaurants and they dress up in their suits and all. I wear what I normally wear. I do, like, podcasting would be my daily thing, my daily activity. And it really would just depend. It'd be like a 50-50. Like, what do I want to do today? I'd probably cook at home more than I do now. Or have in the past. And it would be better food. And I think part of the reason why, in my mind, like, eating out seems more accessible is because here's my mindset. If I'm going to eat crappy food, I might as well enjoy it. And a lot of the crappy food in the grocery stores, like, well, like, I don't know. I feel like if the quality of food that I could cook is better because I have the money, then I'd cook at home more. I'd also, like, have a kitchen that I'd like to cook in. Like, historically, I haven't had all the tools and stuff that I wanted. Like, I'm a little bougie in my palate, like, but I'm not. I'm also, I don't know. Realistically, if I was that rich, I'd probably have a private chef. I'm not cooking. And so probably would eat more at home anyway. So, I mean, that'll be the end. Like, I don't know. I'm walking this through in my head. I think it would be like a 50-50 split. Like, because I wouldn't stop eating out. Like, because every now and then, you know, you're going to crave like I don't know, that fast food style. Like, I'm sure if you go to every rich like a CEO of companies that they're used to eating out at fancy restaurants. And then, like, I'm sure if you take them to a McDonald's, it may not be their favorite thing, but it's going to bring back a level of some sort of nostalgia, I would hope. But anyway, let's move on to Wavy D's questions. His first one, he was growing up, maybe even now, were you a fan of shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Digimon, and did you play the games associated with them? So first off, the answer to the first half of this question, was I a fan of the shows? I didn't even know shows existed. I'm just going to be honest with you. I was completely oblivious. I've said this before, I've never watched a single episode of anime of any kind, and I would include like Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon as part of that category. I've never seen any of that. Right? Like what we would consider anime, like Japanese style anime. Like I don't consider SpongeBob or anything like that anime. That's animated. Some people would because it's animated, but I think it's a little different, right? I didn't know there were shows that went along with it. I'll also say this, while like I played like the Nintendo games of Pokemon, but I had zero idea what I was doing or what was going on. I knew there were cards for it, and like I had Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but again, I had zero idea what was going on. I didn't know how to play the game, and eventually I ended up just giving away all my cards. And I had a lot of them. I had a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. But I just had zero idea what I was doing. And didn't really care about it to the way everyone else did. I thought a lot of the people who were in that sphere were kind of weird and nerdy. Not that that's a bad thing. It wasn't my scene. It wasn't the people that I hung out with that really played with that stuff. Yeah, I just wasn't a fan. I didn't know there were shows. Even now that I know that there's shows, I'd have zero interest to watch it. Wavy D then says, do you watch the show The Boys? And if you did you like the series finale? Well, this is a short answer because I also can say no to this question. I do not watch this. Now, I've been told by at least 3 people now that I need to watch it. I did not ever watch the show. I'm also not a big fan of superhero movies. I don't know. It's just not my thing, to be honest with you. Yeah, so real quick, like real easy with Wavy D's questions. Those sort of genres of a movie and stuff like that just have never really been the things that I've enjoyed growing up. So y'all can discuss the series finale and all of that. Now, with that being said, and knowing that I'm never going to watch the show, right? I went to see the clip that's on social media of the ending, or I guess not the ending, because from what I understand, this finale, the big trending thing. I'm trying not to spoil it because it just happened, right? And y'all know my thing on spoilers. You get 6 months, and then we could talk about it like without saying spoiler alert or me trying to protect it. The big trending thing that happened, I guess, happened from my understanding of reading on Twitter that it happened sort of halfway in the episode. I mean, if it's now I don't know. Are they looking at spin-offs? Again, I'm not in that sphere, so I don't know. So I don't really have an opinion on it, but I wanted to see what people were upset about. I also say this: I think every time a show ends, most people very rarely do series finales end very well. Like even with like my 2 favorite shows that I've ever watched in my lifetime that no longer are being made, which would be Mr. Robot and Manifest. Mr. Robot's series finale, the final episode, and how it concluded was the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen. And I put so much time into that show and trying to understand it. And because it's what, excuse the language as I say, but it's what I call a mindfuck show. Because it's one of those things where, like, you think you're following it, and then something happens when you're like, well, I'm completely off. And they'll just, right? And I felt like I knew where it was headed, and then I'm because it irritated me so much. And then Manifest ended pretty well, considering that it only went 4 seasons when the creator of the show wanted it to go 6 because NBC cut it. And so to get the final season even made, Netflix did it for 1 season. They wouldn't cover it. And so he essentially had to do 3 seasons in 1. And so a lot of it felt rushed in that final season. And I think because of all of that, I think it ended very well, given what we know about it. But yeah, most season finales, most series finales typically don't end well because a lot of people just want the show to continue forever. But I don't know. Again, really long answer for that could have just been left at no. I didn't watch The Boys and don't really know about the finale, don't have an opinion on it. So we will move over to Kara. And Kara's trying to get me in trouble with this first one. Now, understand, I read the questions, and this is the first answer that pops in my head that I'm going to answer with. What's something that society pretends is normal, but isn't? And like I said, she's trying to get me in trouble with this one, because we can go various different ways. I'm just going to go broad here in this category and say sexual deviancy. And what do I mean by that? Because there's a lot of different topics that could cover. And so that could be anything from the normalization of adult content, pornography, the normalization of deviant sexual behavior in terms of like pedophilia, bestiality, like, and that all stems from, and this is where I'm going to get in trouble, normalizing unnatural relations. So the LGBT community, that's not what we would consider normal. If normal, and here's why. Again, this comes down to worldview. My worldview is you can only define something if you create it, right? So human beings didn't create sex, and it didn't create marriage. God did. Literally. The first marriage, God made Adam and then he made Eve. And he put them together, and that was the first marriage. He gets to define how marriage is. Anything else is just a mirage. It's not real. And so this isn't just, we want to be anti, LGBT love. It's no, God, the creator of the universe, defined the boundaries of how this can work. He also defined how sex works and what sex is for, by the way. Because what was the command? In Genesis 1:28, I think it is, he said, "Go therefore and be fruitful and multiply." What was the purpose of him creating sex? Ultimately, the number one reason for sex is procreation. With that being said, that comes with, like, he wouldn't have created the human body and all the pleasure sensors if pleasure wasn't a part of it. Sure, it's to enjoy your spouse as well. But understand the context. In the boundary of what he defined it as, which is one woman, one man, in marriage, in a covenant, in that relationship where they are one, for the purpose of not just pleasure. Because if it was only for pleasure and never about procreation, then you have a culture like we have today, where you kill 3,500 unborn babies a day in the name of freedom or free choice, right? And so if in the big category, so it's pornography, OnlyFans, bestiality, pedophilia. But understand why the push for what they call minor attracted persons. They call them MAPs now, and they're trying to change that from pedophile to MAP. Why? That started because in 2012, 2013, and really before then, as the culture really tried to change and say, oh, well, there's no reason that two dudes couldn't get married. Slippery slope theory took its toll. And this was always the plan. Because the people behind the critical theories and the same-sex theories and all of that, the people behind all the research, they were pedophiles. Just look at the people who did all the tests, and I can't remember his name, Dr. Money. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Money, I think was his name. A lot of these people were sexual deviants, who were pervs. Like, a lot of the testing, like, in the early 60s on, like, child sexuality, which I don't know why we had to do research on that, but, like, they would take, like, toddlers and essentially molest them and to create orgasm for whatever reason. Like, some of these tests, as you look at what they did, to absolutely gross, bro. But they were sexual deviants. And then they hid it behind a good campaign, right? And it was always to make pedophilia the end of the line. It was always to make pedophilia acceptable, in these other sexual deviancies acceptable, so that, well, we're just minor attracted persons. That's how we identify. We can't help it, right? But all sexual deviancy, and again, that comes down to something simple as pornography. So I'm not just saying only the LGBT are wrong. No, it's the straight white males. I don't know why I had to. It's the straight males who sit there and make up, the 95% of men. It's all the men. The 95% of men have claimed to watch porn at least once a week. I think in the last survey that I saw. And I think the number is up to like 70% of women. We've rationalized the objectification of sex. We've tried to redefine. We've tried to play God and redefine what is acceptable. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing the moral decline and the economic decline in our culture. I'm just 100% behind that. Like, when you look at, again, my worldview comes from my faith and my religion. You look at something like Romans 1, where it talks about the judgment of God. The wrath of God is against those who practice unrighteousness, and by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And at the very end of that, it says that God hands these people over to their wickedness. And at the very bottom of the spiral of unrighteousness, so it starts with just blatant idolatry. And we see that in Romans 1, like 23, where it talks about rather than worshiping the Creator, they worship the creature. And in his context, he's speaking of actual idol worship. But in our context, we have idols that we don't like to talk about, whether it's sports or cars or video games or whatever. There's idols that we all have, and we start to worship created things over the Creator. And at the bottom of that unrighteous spiral, it starts with just pure idolatry, and it ultimately becomes serving self, and that's our biggest idol, is self. And that means that the bottom of that spiral, where God just hands us over to our wickedness, always ends in sexual deviancy. Whether whether it's homosexuality, transgenderism, bestiality, pedophilia, whatever it is, right? And it's all idolatry. And I think as a society, as her question says, what's something society pretends is normal? I think a lot of us in our culture today know that it's not right. But most people aren't willing to take a stand for it because they're afraid of being labeled as hateful, as a bigot, as a homophobe, as a transphobe. Guys, I'm not, right, like, and the craziness of those words is like we're not afraid of them. We're just calling out what we consider deviancy, deviant, unnatural behavior. It's not fear. Like, I'm not afraid of a trans person. I'm not. I want the best for you. And I always put it this way. If your next door neighbor's house was on fire and they were inside and you saw it, would you be responsible to at least try to, like, it wouldn't be smart to run into the house, but you're supposed to call, like, would it be wrong if you knocked on the door, started screaming, called their phone, texted them, hey, bro, your house is on fire, you need to get out? And if they were to respond back to you, I'm staying in, it's my choice, you're a hateful bigot, my house isn't on fire, you're just a hateful bigot. Like, that's what the Christian lifestyle is. It isn't, and that's what the message, it isn't, hey, I hate you, and that's why I think that's why I'm going to condemn you, because I'm not condemning you to hell at all. I don't have that power. If I did, there's a reason we don't, because if I did, all my enemies would be burning, bro, and I don't have enemies, but you get the point. Like, I don't have that power to condemn you, but I do have the power to tell you about the person who does have that power. And it's actually the command that I've been given. Hey, bro, the way you're living, it's not good, right? And you have to turn from that, or else you're going to face the wrath of God. And I'm trying to keep you from that, because that's scary, bro. Like, because, like, this holy infinite being who can't be in the presence of sin, he's going to come down and he's going to smite you. Like, have you read the end of the book, bro? He's coming down with flames of fire in his eyes and a sword in his mouth to judge the wicked. Like, this is the same God that, to save his people, sent his own son into the world and had him crucified for the good of his own people. That the wrath of God for those who believe were on him. And you think you're just going to walk scot-free out of this and nothing's going to happen to you. That's a bold strategy. So, like I said, Kara was trying to get me in trouble with that answer. But yeah, a lot of this comes into, like, trans men playing in women's sports. That's not natural, and it's not healthy, and it's not good, it's not beneficial, it does nothing. But sexual deviancy, again, like I was trying to walk down, if the entire purpose of the creation of the idea of the act of sex is for procreation, well, then anything that doesn't procreate is deviant. It deviates from the purpose of sex. And so the entire purpose of intimacy in that way is to enjoy your spouse, to be intimate with them, but also to procreate. That's literally the entire purpose of it. So anything outside of that is deviant behavior. And that's what I think. We pretend it's normal, but we kind of know it's not. Right? She then asks, what's We Too Deep's I'm never doing that again story? I don't know if I've ever had one of these, to be honest. I don't do anything stupid. That's that. And also, like, I'm never, like, I also don't do things that I wouldn't want to do. Right? I don't know. I'm not a very adventurous person. There's a lot of adventurous people out there who will be like, oh, I'll do it once, but I'm never doing that again. I've never had that experience. I'm just going to be honest with you. Yeah. And anything, like, I don't have any crazy stories of, like, oh, I got drunk and fell in the ocean or whatever. Or something stupid. Yeah. I don't have an answer for this one. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've had that type of experience. Yeah. We'll just move to the next one. If your FBI agent had to describe you, that's me, in one sentence, what would they say? They'd probably add me to another government list. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know necessarily, but here's what I'm going to do with this question. I'm going to ask ChatGTP. If my FBI agent had to describe me in one sentence, what would they say? Let's see. That one's funny. He spends half his time dissecting the Bible like a Puritan, and the other half fantasy booking wrestling feuds with the intensity of a federal investigation. Okay. That ChatGPT isn't fine. The problem with that is it's too literal. It just searches the last, like, 4 chats you have with it and thinks it knows you. It's not necessarily all that smart, which is why I'm not afraid of AI, like a lot of people. But, yeah, I don't know. I think it would probably be like, oh, he's ranting again, or, oh, he's, subject is, add him to the anti-Zionist movement list and put him on a watch list. No fly zone. Can't fly. I don't know. Let's ask them. Hey, I know you're watching, and I know you're listening. My FBI agent, do you care to, what are you saying right now? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one either, Caro. Good question, though. Would you rather fight one gorilla or 100 raccoons? I don't know. Depends. Are these raccoons like rabbit, or are they just normal raccoons? Because if they're rabbit, then I'm going to die no matter what. I might as well just make it easy. Bring on King Kong. I'm going to say this, though. Just like when we had the gorilla debate several months ago, gorillas aren't necessarily aggressive unless you're aggressive to them. And so, if I was, like, trapped in a cage with a gorilla, just leave it alone, and you'll probably make it out okay. But I'm assuming because it says that I have to fight it, that I have to fight this gorilla. And at that point, I'm dead, bro. Like, I'm not surviving a fucking gorilla. Excuse my language. But I don't know if I could actually take 100 raccoons. That's That's crazy to even consider. First off, is this a question you saw somewhere, Kara, or did you come up with the idea of fighting a raccoon? I'm gonna pick 100 raccoons because it's almost certain death if it's a gorilla, right? You can't win that fight. There's no amount of strategy or warfare that you can oppose on that thing. It's just gonna beat you, right? Whereas 100 raccoons is definitely scary, but at least it's theoretical that I can survive it. I might come out looking like I just lost a death match in the dumpster behind the Waffle House. But I might live. And as long as it's not rabbit and I don't get bit by it, I'm probably going to be fine. So we'll choose 100 raccoons there. What conspiracy theory almost sounds believable to you? All of them. No, I'm kidding. I'm not up on if there's any new conspiracies. Like, I stopped really researching them probably about 5-6 years ago. I would say the one that was always the most, like, so a lot of people were very interested in, like, lizard people or aliens or flat earth, and I was for a time interested in that one. Until I mean, just honestly, just thinking logically, the earth is a globe. It is round. Just we're just gonna be honest. The one world government conspiracy theory is becoming increasingly more realistic to me. That all the elites, that we're essentially a global oligarchy. That it's a certain rich elite class that controls the globe. And we have this illusion of different countries, but we essentially are just being governed by an oligarchy globally. That is a global elite. And that just becomes more and more increasingly, like, obvious to me. Like, with this push towards globalism that every world leader is essentially pushing, they obviously want a one world government. It's easier, by the way, it's easier to control the population when everything is one world government. Right? And so my big fear with, like, everyone's complaining about these AI data centers. And a lot of people are complaining about them because they're taking farmland or they're putting solar up, and solar doesn't really do much of anything, which I agree with. But a lot of the big fear with these AI data centers is, it's going to steal our water. Not even fractionally accurate. Because they don't understand how these systems work. You fill the tanks up, or you attach to a water source, and it recycles the water that it uses. It doesn't continually use new water. It actually takes more water to farm almonds than one data center takes ever, right? Almond farming uses more water than AI data centers. That's just the reality that the boomer Fox News class, who I have a problem with. I'm just going to be honest. The boomers who sit on Fox News and listen to how bad AI data centers are, they're not going to listen to the reality that it's not actually that bad. They're just trying to scare you. But my fear with AI data centers isn't the water usage or the electricity usage or AI necessarily in and of itself, or the loss of jobs or any of that. All of those things are necessarily negative, but that's not the greatest negative I think that's going to come out of them, because I don't think that that's the reason they're building these data centers. That's the cover. I think the actual reason they want these data centers is so that we could become like China and have cameras on every street corner, and they're going to house all the recording in there as well. That's why they're trying to put them everywhere. And they're hiding them in rural centers. Like, you can't put a data center in New York City. There's no room. But two, people would catch on real quickly what you're doing. So you go to upstate New York, Albany area where there's no people and there's a lot of farms, and you put it there. And that's where you house all of your surveillance state. That's what I right? And so for me, the conspiracy theory that I would say, I don't even really know if it's a theory anymore. But like one world government, new world order, globalism is a cancer, by the way. And the more we try to become a globalized culture, the less freedom we have as a people. Which is why I'm upset that the America First crowd is now leaning towards globalism. Kind of crazy to me. Anyway, so that would be probably the most believable one to me. Because I think it's almost pretty certain now that... So the other one, and this is the dangerous one that the FBI agent listening to me from the last question is going to put me on a list for. Another one would be... I got to say this properly. There is a global... It's global, but I also think it's... So I got to be careful how I say this, because I don't think it's Jewish. I think it's Israeli. And there's a difference. Because I don't think this has anything to do with the religion of Judaism. But I do think it has to do with something of the country of Israel. And that America is occupied by them. Like, the fact that their interests are more important. Like, Donald Trump, at this current moment, while people are struggling to live, gas prices are average in the country $5. And in some places are like $7 for just normal gas. 87 octane gas, $7 a gallon. Beef prices are on the rise. You can't afford it. But while all that's happening for the normal everyday person, Donald Trump is on the news parading around talking about his daughter converting to Judaism, talking about how he's strongly favored in Israel, and if he wanted to run for prime minister of Israel, he could. And so something happened where Israel became like Trump's number one priority. And a lot of people were like, oh, well, Trump is the puppet of Israel. And I think it's actually the other way around. I think Trump thinks he's controlling Israel. But either way, this conspiracy theory going around of what they call like international organized Jewry. Now, I don't like that term because I don't think it's Jewish by name, right? But this idea that we have, and again, a lot of the people who would call this anti-Semitic, would be the boomer class who were taught that Israel is our greatest ally, and we have to stand with Israel because that's what God wants us to do. And that's just not biblically accurate. And that's my word. Like, I don't hate Jews. I don't think they're the cause of everyone's problem. Like, I'm not going to go Nick Fuentes level I think there is some anti-Semitic people out there, but I'm also not going to go Tucker Carlson, and Tucker's acting the way he's acting because he's being paid on the other side to be anti-Israel. And so I want to be on the balance where I'm just going to take the Thomas Massey approach and say we shouldn't take foreign money and foreign interests shouldn't be involved in our country. Whether it's Ukraine, we shouldn't send Ukraine money. We shouldn't send Russia money. We shouldn't send China money. We shouldn't send Israel money. And everyone has no issue saying we shouldn't send Russia foreign aid. No one has any issue saying we shouldn't send Ukraine, like on the right, especially on the right, the conservative right. No one would have an issue saying we shouldn't send Ukraine money, right? No one would have an issue saying we shouldn't send India money, for foreign aid, or we shouldn't send aid to Haiti or whatever, right? Because we have problems in America. But the second you question why we give money, and we give the most money of any nation in the world to one country, and that is Israel, and the second you question that and say, well, wouldn't that money be useful to be spent in America for American interest? And the second you mention that, you're labeled an anti-Semite. And I said nothing about the Jews. I'm just questioning our relation with the nation state named Israel. That was, right, founded in 1940. Like, and it's so many people on the conservative right on my team, if you want to call it that, would say, they would say that I'm being anti-Semitic by questioning Israel, right? And all I'm saying is, you said we were America first. So I'm asking why we are giving money to foreign countries. And the last time I checked, Israel's a foreign country. And if we can't give it to Ukraine, we shouldn't give it to Israel. Right? I'm just asking for that level of consistency. And so that just leads me to believe there may be something to this idea. Because I live by this quote. If you want to know who's controlling you, see who you can't talk about. And if I can't even question Israel and American interest being combined, like if I can't question why Israel's interests have to be our interests and why we always have to support them, well, then something's going on. I mean, they took out everyone that's ever questioned AIPAC, Republican or Democrat, whether it's Jamal Bowman, I think it's his name. He was a Democrat. Cori Bush, Democrat. Thomas Massey is a Republican. Even guy as far back as like the 60s. I think his name was Finley. Anyone that's questioned AIPAC or Israel or any support going to Israel have been removed by the lobbyists. And that's a problem, I think. And so I'm not saying that that's necessarily something I believe, that like the Jews run the world, because I don't. But I think that we have to question why so many people are unwilling to question why we just bow down to Israel. But yeah, with that, I'll say that. I'll get added to another government watch list and watch over my shoulder so they don't Charlie Kirk me. And that's probably not appropriate to say. But it is what it is. Like, because the events that have happened with the Thomas Massey election that I mentioned on the Tuesday episode at the end, and Kara asked the question, and me and Kara had talked about, I asked for your guys' opinion on that as well, and she was giving me hers, and we were talking about it. And it was something I haven't said to her, but I'll say now to the podcast, is like, I've even questioned, like, because Charlie started questioning why we're giving money to Israel right before he died. And I don't like where that conversation takes me, because then it takes me into Candace Owens land, and I don't agree with Candace Owens. I would like to think that Erica Kirk didn't have her husband killed. And I don't think it was Erica Kirk who did it. I'm just going to be like straight up, I'm not Candace Owens. But now I'm starting to sit here and question, like, I think Tyler Robinson did it. But was there influence? Was he influenced in some way by some foreign entity to go and do this? And I don't like where that conversation takes me, because I don't believe that. But I don't like. Yeah, I just don't like where that conversation leads. I don't. So, we'll move on to the next question. She said, then I got something new for you for the first time ever. We Too Deep will react and give his take to this. Am I the asshole? And so this is her question. She gives us a long question. So we're going to read it, and then I'm going to react to it. So this is how we'll end the show. Am I the asshole? for refusing to cover my coworker's shift after finding out she lied to our boss about me. I work at a warehouse where we all are expected to, quote, help each other out, unquote, when scheduling issues come up. I usually don't mind covering shifts because I know life happens. A week ago, one of my coworkers asked me to switch shifts with her because she supposedly had a family emergency. I agreed out of the kindness of my heart. Later that night, another coworker posted Instagram stories from a concert, and the coworker I covered for was there partying with them. I was irritated, I was lied to, but honestly, I probably would have let it go if that was the end of it. Then I found out she recently told our boss that I have been slacking and difficult to work with. Apparently, she blamed me for a production delay. That was actually her fault. I only learned about it because my boss casually brought up concerns during a meeting and I had to defend myself. So when she asked me again this week to cover a shift because she really needed help, I said no. She immediately got irritated and said I was being petty over, quote, office drama. A couple coworkers think I should have just helped because refusing coverage makes everyone's life harder. Others think she's burned that bridge herself by lying about me behind my back. Now things at work are awkward and tense, and I'm wondering if I should have just stayed professional and covered the shift anyway. Am I the asshole? Well, it takes an asshole to know an asshole, and I'm an asshole. So, I would say this. From the first sentence, the answer is no. Let's read that first sentence again. Am I the asshole for refusing to cover my coworker's shift after finding out she lied to our boss about me? In there, didn't need the rest of the context. The answer is no. But thank you for the context, because now we can discuss this a little bit more. I am in this, so I understand sort of the situation you're in terms of, not my current job, but when I worked restaurants, it's sort of the same feel. Like, you just cover shifts, right? And you mentioned that some of your coworkers feel like you should have taken it because you not taking it hurts them. They have to do more work, which is really what that comes down to. And I'll even tell them to go, just go do some work. Like, tell them to F off, bro. Like, it is, and this is where I'm at. I live by an acronym that I learned working restaurants from a manager. He was former Navy, and he said him and his Navy buddies created an acronym for Navy, which is never again volunteer yourself. Here's what I've learned about the workforce, especially like warehouse work, restaurant work, anything that's not necessarily corporate, but even corporate jobs, right? Here's what I've learned. Most of the people you work with don't care about you outside of work. They only like you as long as you're doing their work for them. And if you were to quit or were to get fired or were to die, God forbid, we never wish that on anyone. But if you were to quit, get fired, or die, they would have your job posted the next day, if not the same day, and would have you replaced within a week. They don't care about you. So, why are you giving extra effort than what is needed? Now, I understand, with that being said, there's nothing wrong with covering shifts. There's nothing wrong with switching shifts. There's nothing wrong with, especially if covering shifts mean you get overtime, get your bread. But that is and should be up to you, not to anyone else, not the circumstances of the shift that day. I can't tell you how many times I work restaurants where I would have a manager call and say that, I remember this one time in particular. Now I was a manager at this time. I was the opening manager for the shift this day. Ran the opening shift. Got there at 8 a.m. Came inside, prepped for the whole day. Because that's how I did prep. Most people just prep for their shift. I prep for the whole day so that when the manager comes in at 2 that's going to close, they don't got any prep. Because that's just how I am. And I prep pretty quick. But at least at that time I did. Came in, got everything started, and I was supposed to leave at 5 o'clock. I ended up staying till 6 because we were busy, and so I couldn't do my afternoon task until the rush ended. So I ended up staying till 6. I clocked out at 6, got in my car, and within 10 minutes, I literally had just got on the interstate. The closing manager called and said, "Can you come back? We have 2 call-outs. I'm down a person in the you can, yeah." And I said, "Well, I'm not running in a manager I'm just going to be overpaid cook today." She was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I was like, "All right, I'll come around." I don't mind that. And here's why. I opened the next morning, and I didn't. So I could at least, by doing that, control what I was walking into. But also, I like the night shift. If it's not a problem for you, I don't think picking up shifts is necessarily a negative. But again, it's up to you. I can't tell you how many times I was begged, "You got to stay," or told, "You got to stay for me." No, I don't. I'm only legally required to work what I'm scheduled. At least in North Carolina. I don't know what it's like in California. But, yeah. So I would say no, you're not the asshole for not covering the shift. Don't worry about it. If they talk shit to you, that's one of those where you just tell them to beat it. Yeah. Especially if, the last time you covered for someone, you found out they were lying. I agree, they burnt that bridge. So, I would say, Kara, you're clear. You are not the asshole for that circumstance. And that's where we will end Fan Question Friday. What an episode that we had today. Thank you all for listening, for submitting questions. If you're listening and you want to submit questions, join the Discord channel at the link in the description. Until next time, I will see you on the next episode of the Slapping Meat Community Show.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride, whether it's NXT or NFL time. Going in the ropes and fourth and deep, Slapping Meat Community every Tuesday. Every Tuesday.